I don't start without the music.
Oh, we're not doing we're got to say hi to everybody in the stream.
Oh, is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we're live. For those of you who are out there in the stream, excuse us. We are having a bit of a pun moment, but we're excited that you guys are tuning in. We want you guys to like, tag, and share this conversation with others individuals today. We're going to be talking about how do we begin the process of conciliation between races. We've seen so much that has been divisive and tearing everyone apart, from schools to politics to everything else. But how do we get to a place that we begin the process of healing? How do we begin to get to a place that we can begin to put away our knives and our guns and our whips and all of the other words that are so harmful, and that we can then begin to come together and really be what I often say on this show, the United Shades of Gray, not black or white, red or blue, purple, purple states. So that's what our conversation is going to be today. We want you guys to tune in, like us, tag, share this conversation as we continue forward. Thanks.
And we'll begin our recording in just a moment.
Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online at WSGW.com. Here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Hey, how you doing this evening? Thank you for tuning in to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America, where we always challenge you to talk about those hard conversations that nobody else wants to talk about it. Well, we have those conversations right here. We do them live and in living color. If you're tuning in on social media, we want you to like, tag, and share this conversation. Build an audience so that we can talk about what's really important here today. I'm in the studio with my in-studio reoccurring co-host, Mr. Mark Bassett. Mark, give a shout out to the people.
Hey, people. Great to be here live and in person tonight after being in Fort Riley, Kansas last week. So.
Yeah, and he was just teasing us. For those who are out there, he's teasing us that he's going to be poolside or jacuzzi side next week as we go live. But it's okay, Mark. We'll take the brunt of this cold weather. We'll take one for the team. Chandler P in the place to be. And Chandler, our producer, why don't you give a shout out with Chandler?
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight?
All right. So those of you who are listening, this is WSGW 100.5 FM. We are doing a live recording, if you would. So you can actually call in, leave a message, post a message in the social media stream if you're online. Or you can listen to the show in its entirety when it airs live in replay, if that's such a thing, on Sundays at 7 p.m. right here on 100.5 FM and 790 AM simulcast. All right, so we're going to be talking, as I said, is conciliation possible? Somebody's like, what is conciliation? I wanted to use the term reconciliation, but every time I hear that term reconciliation, I think, like, were we ever truly on the same page wholeheartedly as it relates to race? So let's get there. Let's talk about what it's going to take for us to get there. And we're going to see if we can tear down some walls and build some bridges and hopefully create a coalition as we saw take place. What I loved about the 50s and the 60s, even though this was light years before I was even on the planet, was the fact that when you look back, it was a coalition of people that had like minds, like thoughts, and they were fighting for a common cause. And that was regardless of your race, your color. And I think that if any change is ever going to happen in this world, and if we're ever going to be better, it's going to take a coalition of folk who don't look all the same. And so that means we got to have blacks, whites, Asians, browns, everybody on the table, at the table, having this conversation. Well, you know what we like to do? We like to start off by talking about what is hot off the press. All right. So we're going to get into this conversation. I want to start today. And this is crazy. I don't even know how to deal with this conversation, but the federal hate crimes against Ahmaud Arbery, that particular trial that took place, we know that we had Travis and Greg McMichaels, along with William Roddy Bryant. Is it just me, or does his name sounds like he's like a 1980s wrestler?
Roddy Piper.
yeah, okay, that's what it is. I'm like, this guy sounds like he is some type of 1980s wrestler or something. But anyways, they they were found guilty in their court cases against Ahmaud Arbery and the death of him, and now they were there to serve trial for hate crimes, which is the first time that anyone has really been tried for hate crimes in the United States, which is quite interesting since they made this legislation. They went through those. Did you guys watch this at all? Have you seen any of this? Did you get a?
I've read a few articles, but I haven't watched anything.
Okay, you're not a watcher, are you?
There's no real news anymore, so I refuse to watch it.
Right now, yeah, there's one thing that we talk about, and that's all we talk about when it comes to the news. What were you going to say, Chandler?
Oh, I just follow things on Twitter, so if I get an update, I see about the headline like 20 different times and maybe a few details.
Okay, well, what was interesting, I don't know if it was interesting. It was just an exercise, and it was just difficult to watch. It was, they went through all of their tweets. And so what the prosecution set up was that, Ahmaud Arbery, the fact that they were going to try this as a hate crime, they had to say that, this crime happened to Ahmaud Arbery because he was black and for no other reason. So therefore, it was a racial hate crime. Well, they went through all of these text messages, and I was just kind of like, what kind of boneheads, would sit here and have these kinds of conversations? Cracker Barrel, instead of calling it Cracker Barrel, they say there's too many black people here. We need to call this, the N-word bucket. I mean, just those crazy kinds of conversations. And so, they were found guilty, and that race was actually the reason. And when you look, if you were to listen to the level of hatred that was in these text messages, they were talking about, hey, I would have shot these individuals, and just the anger and the hatred that existed in these individuals as it related to people of color. It was just amazing. But one thing that I did say, these guys have not learned from Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick and his downfall. Those text messages, they always come back to bite you in the butt, and they use their own words against them. And so they will be having life in prison. And so it's interesting to see what will take place. Because now I think the prosecutor or whatever in that particular county who refused to initially bring charges against them will now be undergoing an investigation. It'll be interesting to see what happens in that particular situation. All right, moving forward, I want to talk.
If I say something on
absolutely,
that?
Go ahead, my man.
The thing that obviously it's a super sad situation. The thing that I found interesting was his father and son.
Yes,
and it just to me is a real life example of how hate and racism is passed down from one generation to the next. I don't think people are born that way.
Absolutely.
That kid wasn't born thinking that, and he learned that from his father.
And he became a pro. And it's crazy because they're now going to serve time together.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing in the world. I didn't even think about that during the course of this entire thing, but you're absolutely right. But we're going to talk about Brian Flores, and we talked about him before. Brian Flores, this is just this whole piece is kind of interesting to me. But we'll get to it anyways. Brian Flores is the NFL coach that was fired from the Miami Dolphins, and then he decided to file a racial discrimination case against the NFL. And I thought to myself, surely this guy is never like you. When you fight against the NFL, you're Colin Kaepernick. You're never working in the league. Get your monies and enjoy your time off, right? But it's interesting because he has now just recently accepted a position with Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he is now going to be their defensive coordinator for which is the craziest thing in the world. And I feel some kind of way about this because I'm saying, well, in one hand, I'm like, okay, it's great that you get to do what you love. I get it. I think that if anybody came and said, Colin, we want you to play on our football team because of the love for the game, you would go there. But in the same token, it's like you're a head coach, and it's like, how do you go back and be like the assistant when you're?
You do that all the time, though. You see that, like Notre Dame just hired a defensive coordinator.
Yeah,
he was the head coach at Temple and Miami. Got fired from Miami.
Yeah,
has been an assistant in the NFL, and so head coaches get fired and they go back and are assistants all the time.
Yeah, well, it was just the craziest. I guess what was different about this is because the lawsuit is about him being able to be hired as a head coach. And so, I guess he loves the sport. But what I do recognize is going over there and being under Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is, when you look at Brian and at Brian Flores and Mike Tomlin, and I'm a brother. They have similarities. They sort of look like they could be family. They look a little bit alike. And I say that because Mike has a great reputation. And I think that I think he'll be safe over there working with Mike. And I think that Mike won't be one to be, bucking against any systems. And I think he gets treated quite well over there. And so we'll see what happens with that situation. However, what was interesting that came up, and this is really the reason I brought that up, is that Brian Flores, he refused to sign an NDA after his firing. So because of that, he can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. And one of the things that he said was that the owner of the Dolphins, when he was fired, offered him millions of dollars for him to remain silent. And I just thought this conspiracy and this entire situation gets more interesting. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to win a case against the NFL while he's working with the NFL. It's kind of weird that you're suing your boss and you're still working at work, but I guess it happens all the time, Mark.
Well, not at the same company. He's being paid by a different company. It's a weird, obviously the NFL is a weird situation. Now, I'll be interested. I think he's going to struggle, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. Because people have preferred candidates all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not uncommon for, like me, both Dow and Hemlock,
to
say, hey, we've got a job open. It's open, but having a preferred candidate. And someone would have to really knock your socks off to say, like, well, I'm not going to choose a preferred candidate.
Well, see,
I think he's going to struggle winning that case.
And I agree with you. I think that the preferred candidate thing, and this is what we were talking about last time, and we're going to get to this in a really strange way. I think we're going to end up talking about this preferred candidate situation, maybe in a different context. So I'm going to let it slide right now.
Yep.
But when I look at this, and I think that happens all the time, it only becomes problematic when the preferred candidate is a member of a small pool that reflects the same people that are doing the pool hiring. And so that's a whole nother situation, but we'll see what takes place. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, my man. I'll be interested in seeing what takes place with, good luck, Brian, over there. Knock him out as the defensive coordinator for the Steelers. Now, we're going to return our attention really quick for those of you who are listening to Kim Potter sentencing. I didn't really get to follow the entire case. So I saw the beginning, the opening arguments, and then I kind of came in to the final verdict and the sentencings of what's going on in this particular case. But she was the one who had mistaken her taser, her gun for a taser. And, hey, I guess I was told that this happens every so many years, every 10 years or so, mistakes like this occur. She shot and killed Dante Wright in a traffic stop in Minnesota. I think it's called Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. And the interesting thing here, and I really don't understand this, in the rendering of the verdict, I know that the the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, had requested that, hey, because his judgment, he would suggest that a fair treatment would be about 7 years for her in terms of her sentencing. And the guidelines, I think, were somewhere between 6 and 14. And the judge has the discretion to determine what that should be. And, this, what's her name? Regina Chu, Judge Regina Chu. She's an Asian American woman. She was crying at delivering this judgment of 2 years and said that she would most likely serve no more than 16 months for the murder of an individual. Accidental or not, this is a young man that will never be able to grow up to his full potential, a family that is going to be without that son, a father who will never be able to raise his child, and a child that will never know the fullness of who his father is, and was given what was a remarkably light sentence. And most of the pundits are saying they cannot believe that 2 years, 24 months, 16 months actually doing the time was the verdict. What are your thoughts concerning this? Because I want to share something that was said by the mother of this young man that was slain.
This is one that I kind of got a whiff of. I heard about the judge crying during the reading of the verdict, and then people were like, "That's nothing. That's nothing. Why are you? What? There's I don't understand what's going on here." And then this is the first time I'm hearing about like what actually happened, and I'm just a little flabbergasted. That's a lot like anybody else.
Yeah, and the judge was crying, saying, don't. This is not that case. This is not that case. This is not Rodney King, where someone kneeled on this person's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. But you know, she's like, and 24 months is a very long time. It changed. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, this kid is going to be dead forever. But the mom said something. There is a book.
The mom of the kid.
Of the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mom of the kid said something, and she took a page out of, I think it's Robin DiAngelo, the book that we did, White Fragility. And there's a section of the book, a chapter that's called White Woman's Tears. And it says that, you know, how deadly the tears of a white woman have been. And for years, you know, there have been, you know, slaves and people who have died. We've heard the cases where white women would cry and they would say that this person raped them later to, you know, to recant their story. And in this particular situation, this white woman says, you know, I thought, you know, my tears were good enough, but I guess the tears of certain white women have a greater validity, excuse me. And so it was an interesting dynamic to see her have that conversation, but I could not understand for the life of me. And they brought the attorney general in and asked him, you know, what was his thoughts? And he was like, you know, we want everyone to just accept the outcome, but how does a mother accept that her child's life, the penalty for killing her son was 2 years? I mean, you know, 24 months.
A year and 2 months. Well, no, it was a year and.
Well, if it's 16, that's a year and 4 months.
Yeah, a year and 4 months.
Yeah, bad at math.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So I thought it was just really crazy, but these are examples of when we talk about issues in our criminal justice system. And this one attorney down in Mississippi who's working for one of the agencies to correct wrong convictions. He says he doesn't call it the criminal justice system. He calls it the criminal system because there's no justice in it. But what he said was, you know, these types of things are the things that they're continually looking for. How can we have these types of renderings come down without any understanding that there has to be some sort of bias? How do you make that decision, you know, when the guidelines are one thing? You know, a removal from the guidelines to some degree is understandable because this was an accident. And I think that most people would say, okay, you know, you're a veteran. You've lived longer than this man. You've worked longer in the police department than this man has been alive. How do you make that decision? But it happens, I guess, every so many years, situations like this occur. But 24 months is ridiculous. So let's go on. We're going to be done. That's all I got for what's hot off the press. But I do want to give you our spotlight on Black History Month. And today we're going to talk about Black Wall Street, aka also the Tulsa race riots. For those of you who have never heard about this, in 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street, was one of the most prosperous African-American communities in the United States. But on May 31st of that year, the Tulsa Tribune reported that a Black man, Dick Rowland, attempted, and this was a young guy, a 17-year-old kid, Dick Rowland attempted to rape a white woman on an elevator, Sarah Page. Whites in the area refused to wait for the investigative process to play out, sparking 2 days of unprecedented racial violence. 35 city blocks went up in flames, 300 people died, and 800 were injured. This is such a crazy situation, but defense of the white female virtue was the express motivation for this collective racial violence. Now, I want to go on, and I'm going to just continue, but one of the things that was so important about this particular passage of scriptures, because this is, you know, post the beginning of Reconstruction, Blacks were moving from Mississippi, the Jim Crow laws and all those things that were going on, and they were moving into these communities. And one particular person, a developer by the name of O.W. Gurley, he was the person who created this powerful community known as Black Wall Street in 1906, which is interesting because my grandfather was born in 1909. But he was a wealthy African-American male from Arkansas, moved to Tulsa and purchased 40 acres of land that was made. And he made sure that it was sold to African-Americans who were coming there to do some good. They wanted to see something different. And so they began to do this, having theaters and hotels and all types of things that were there, factories and all of the key pieces of industry, banks that were a part of this community. And this is what I love about this, Mark, and I think that you'll be able to appreciate this. As a result of this segregation that took place, the African-American dollar in that community turned over 36 to 100 times in that Greenwood district before leaving. That's almost a year before leaving. Right now, the African-American dollar in a Black community doesn't turn over one time, but in this particular community, not even one time in most cases. And so right now, at that particular time, 36 to 100 times, that is almost unheard of. And we see that in Asian communities. We see that in certain Eastern communities where they do that. They really support their own. But the fact that you're able to turn it over 36 to 100 times allows you to understand the depth and the breadth of the types of industries that you had. So they were a very self-sufficient community. What took place, I told you, 17-year-old Dick Rowland, elevator operator in nearly the Drexel building, that was the name of it, was taken into custody after he had, the thing was the elevator floor had gotten stuck and he tripped and he, put his hand on the white girl. She screamed and no one really knew what was going on. She never said that she was being raped by him. When she screamed, he understood that he was in trouble. So he took off running. And that was the beginning of this entire community being destroyed. Now, what was also interesting is that on last year in 2021, we saw one of the last survivors. She was 104 years old, that actually was there for a part of the reparations for the 300 families. She was a descendant of those 300 families that were murdered. And she was just saying that she wanted justice. And so it was so interesting to see that take place. But when we look at this particular situation that took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it brings, so many people have asked me, hey, Kareem, why, aren't Black communities building their own communities? Why don't they get their own banks? Why aren't they developing? And we see that Black Wall Street or Tulsa is only one example of those districts that existed. And it was because of hatred that these things, whenever we did too well, they would burn them down. And, what was crazy, this is what's crazy, Mark. In this particular story, these 300 people that were murdered, they were thrown into mass graves, and they literally tried to just cover up that this never took place. And so last year in 2021, they began to find these graves, these mass graves, and uncover some of these things. So this is one of the atrocities. This is Black History Month. So I want to make sure that people are aware of the things that are going on in the world, things that make us uniquely us, and to understand that Black Americans have made great contributions to this country. And so I think it's important for us to talk about it. All right. So we're going to move forward, and we're going to begin a conversation. I see those of you who are out there tuning in via social media. We want you to like, tag, and share this conversation. And let's get involved. Today's topic is going to be, is conciliation possible? I want to just start real quick by asking us off the cuff, Mark, do you think reconciliation or conciliation is possible between the races?
Anything is possible, for sure. 100%. I do.
Okay. What about you over there, Chandler?
I like that you changed it from reconciliation to conciliation, because I do agree with that. Like, when you've got hundreds of years where there's been a disparity and not really like people being on the same level as each other. I mean, I believe at some point we can, remove a lot of bad elements, but it's still gonna take a while because the bad elements like to stick.
Well, and it's not that, and I think that, and I would agree that it is possible. I think that it is a challenge that we'll continually have to work with, but I think that hopefully what we're doing here at United Shades of Gray, through the relationship that Mark and I have, and with you being here, Chandler, as well, is that we can begin to forge a pathway that people can begin to see, hey, you know what, it's really scary, but it's not so scary. And if we can show through the demonstration of our conversation, honest, open conversation about what's going on, then maybe we can encourage other people to do the same thing. Mark, why are you so dedicated and committed to this process of inclusion? And it's something that we've talked about a lot. What makes it so important to you?
I think ultimately, I just feel like it's the right thing to do. We're all people. We're all created the same. I think what motivates all of us is very similar. And for me, it's about breaking down the walls and correcting, I think, misconceptions, and it's not black, white. It's, and I've got all sorts of examples, Asian. It's people tend to, I think, congregate with those that are similar to them. And it's really easy to make assumptions about people that are different from them from afar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jeffrey Bulls, who is listening out there, We did get your comment. We posted it on the screen. Conciliation is impossible without true repair and recompense, or however you like to say it. But I agree with you 1000%. And I think that's a part of the real conversation that needs to take place. Many times we want to put bandages on places where you really need to do some stitches and can have some really serious surgery. But I think that it is possible. I think that it's something that we should endeavor to do. And I think that it starts when we begin to take account of where we are as individuals. We take a good look at ourselves in the mirror. As Michael Jackson said, I'm looking at the man in the mirror. And we begin to change our ways. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, and we're going to come back with more conversations about conciliation. I hope you guys will begin to help us by building out this audience, because we really want to get into the depths of this. Please share your comments in the stream. We will post them to our screen so that we can begin to see what is it impossible. Is it impossible or is it not impossible? We're counting on you to be a part of this conversation. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back right after this commercial break with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. What's going on, my people? We're glad that you guys are tuning in today for this conversation, this evening for this conversation. We're going to get into the crux of this thing. We're going to begin to just kind of talk about some ways or some things that must take place in order for us to really have a conciliation. Jeff Bulls, what's to the point of what you were saying? We've got to have some true repair. We've got to have some true repentance, and there has to be recompense for our mistakes or rewards. That will be an interesting conversation as we have that. But I think that understanding where we are, embracing what has happened, and just being honest with what we're feeling, I think is a key piece of that puzzle. So we'll take that conversation as we continue with the segment 2 on this evening.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
All right, guys, we are back with United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. And today we're going to be talking about, is conciliation possible? For some of you are saying, why isn't he saying reconciliation? Because I don't think that we've ever really been at a place that we have really been, reconciled together. So I think that we have to be able to do this. And I want to do this just by talking about some basic steps that need to take place. And then we'll have some dialogue and you can share your input as well. I am a person who believes in tearing down walls and building bridges. And Mark, I know that's exactly what you said on the other side of this conversation and on the other side of the commercial break. And what's interesting is this, because we have a young African-American man born and raised in the city of Saginaw and an old white guy. No, I'm just joking, Mark.
I am an old white guy.
From Midland. Originally,
Yeah,
where are you from originally?
I was born in Louisville, Kentucky.
Born in Louisville.
Raised in Hawaii.
Raised in Hawaii.
And you don't know this, but in 6th grade, second semester,
yeah,
the kids from the military base, which were all white, were bused into the inner city to desegregate the black school in Norfolk, Virginia. So,
that's an interesting
there are
fact.
a lot of good stories on that one.
So that was probably very interesting.
It was.
But so we're saying so is it Oahu or Aloha? What do we say?
Shaka bra.
Shaka bra?
That's shaka bra.
Shaka bra.
Aloha. This is shaka bra.
Shaka bra.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
I don't even know what I just said, but what did I say?
This is how's it going?
Oh, shaka bra. Yeah, shaka bra out
it
there.
It can mean a lot of things. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So,
I was getting ready to censor there.
Shaka brother. No, shaka bra. All right. So we're out there, but we're going to talk about this conversation. And the reason we are, Mark and I have struck up a friendship of the unlikelies. and I say that because it's not a typical connection that most people would feel comfortable with. But when I met him, I spoke my piece and was very honest, and he was like, "Yo, I'm cool with that." I like the fact when people are direct and to the point. And those of you know me, I don't, I kind of say what I feel. I'm not trying to be mean, but I think that honesty is very important. And when I began to have conversations with him and we began to get into some deep conversations, he was very honest. And one thing that I loved about what has happened with us, Mark, is that I say, really, I speak my truth to you. You do so in like manner. And we don't always agree about those things. But one thing that we do understand is that our connection is genuine. We have a genuine respect for one another that continues to fuel this conversation and our desire to do this.
I think this is a perfect example of why I believe conciliation is possible.
Absolutely.
And it's one interaction at a time is what. And
there
it
you
takes
go.
that people have encouraged to kind of broach that and try to have those interactions. And it takes, I think, leadership at the top, which we're sorely lacking. So,
and I think that's a great way to say that. Well, one of the things, and we're going to give you some key ways, just kind of 7 thoughts on how we can begin a process of conciliation, because I'm sure there are many of you, especially in today's time in the society, and I don't even know what to expect with this election coming up. This is a midterm election year, but this is also when we begin to see who's going to be doing, the front runners for this national campaign. And our politics as of late have been probably more divisive than I've ever seen in my entire life. So I think it's important to have these conversations so that you can have these conversations in your own neighborhood, in your own schools, and the communities where you dwell. So one of the first things I think is really important is that, and what was interesting, okay, let me start off by saying this, because I think this is important. As I was studying different things and recommendations for the conciliatory process between races, what I thought was interesting was that there were no real, outside of churches, the majority of these entities that wanted to talk about reconciliation and healing the races and social justice were church or religious organizations that were saying, hey, these are things that we need to take into consideration. And I'll say that the reason I thought that was important, because I do think that it takes a certain amount of faith and a divine love for us to be able to have these tough conversations. And Mark, I know that you are a man of faith as well as I am. And we rely on that faith to be able to forgive us when we're short, when we fall short. And I think that we all fall short in our understanding and even our explanations. And sometimes, we've had conversations where I'm like, Mark, don't ever say that again. yeah. We were in one particular meeting where it sounds like, yeah. The other person was like, don't ever say that again. And they didn't understand. It was ignorance. But I think that having the place where you can feel safe to just kind of say and be authentically yourself and take the correction, I think is really important. What do you think?
100% agree. I mean, it's, and I don't know. I think religion is important,
right?
But I don't know that I don't view that as essential, because I think at their core, people are good, and if you get to know somebody, the vast majority of times you find out they're a good person, and that frankly they have way more similarities to you than differences. And I think that's what's so disheartening for me today about the political discourse. And that's why I refuse to watch news anymore, because it's not news. It's just opinion pieces.
Right.
All of it is just so divisive, and there's no true leadership. Because to me, a leader, and that's what I've found so disheartening about President Trump, is that a leader creates an aspirational vision that pulls people together, not rips them apart. And to me, that's the first job of a leader. And anymore, I feel like a lot of the political, quote unquote, leaders are trying to divide and not unite.
Man, come on, that's leadership 101.
Yeah.
We got to create a situation for us to coalesce the troops around a common vision. But one of the first steps that they use, the reason I thought was interesting is I just thought, because Mark, I differ in the fact that I don't think that people are innately good. I think people are innately selfish and self-motivated.
And so you and I will have to agree to disagree. Because at their core, I mean, if you look at all the different religions and take, whether you're Buddhist, Hindu, at their core, their teachings are very similar.
Absolutely.
And those teachings ultimately came from different men, and And so I just have this innate belief that at their core, people are good and that people want to make a difference for the positive, generally speaking. Yes, we're flawed by being selfish and wanting to protect ourselves.
And let me tell you why I think this is that I say this is because when and I'm very vocal about this, and I was very vocal about this in 2020 during the height of what took place with the cries for social justice and George Floyd. I was really just kind of blown away in that moment by the lack of response by my white evangelical brothers. There's so many other churches, I'm a part of the Church of Saginaw, part of this organization, and all of these different Christian organizations, which we are all supposed to be one, fighting for common, a common unity that we're fighting. These are my brothers and sisters that I've prayed together. We've done, community revivals and projects together. And during that time of crisis, not a single one of them reached out to me and said, brother, we're feeling your pain. Now I've had my white friends, those individuals that are close to me, that reached out and said, yo, man, we don't even know what to say. This is crazy. We support you. We just want you to know that, man, this is crazy and we got your back. But none of those pastors. And then even when I called them to the table, and it said, look, where are my white brothers, in ministry? Where were you at? They were still silent. And
did you ask them why? I'm curious. I mean, because even the world has become so politicized.
Right.
If they came out and supported Black Lives Matter, did that mean they were not supporting Trump, who they were supporting?
Well, I think that even that statement right there, because I'm not necessarily a big proponent of Black Lives Matter. I think that Black lives have value.
Yeah.
When you get to the core of what Black Lives Matter, it's something different than what I would fully engage in. And it's not because of Black folks, because I believe I'm a Black man. So I think Black lives have value. So I stand behind that component of what they were doing. But I did, and I had that conversation. And many of them felt, they were in line and step. Even with like the national individuals that like Paula White and individuals that I had revered and listened to in terms of their scriptures, and they, been at Black churches because they were in line and step with where President Trump was in his agreement. And I just did not understand that. And one of the things that we talked about, look, I voted for him, but hey, this dude is off the rails. He's somewhere different. I can respect that. And I never got that. So I thought it was interesting that, a religious entity would be the ones that would be giving this kind of information. But as I looked, I pulled together pieces that I think that are very important. So the first one was to confront your own sins of racism, prejudice, and bias. And when we talk about that, we have a desire to otherize people in our communication with those individuals. But we all have these biases. We all have these issues of concern that I think that are important for us to address and really discuss. But I think that when we talk about this, we've really got to begin to look like, how do I feel about certain issues? Why do certain issues cause my feathers to be ruffled? And why do I struggle in certain situations? If you understand what I'm saying, Tyler? Chandler. Why do I always want to call Chandler Tyler? But
I'm going to get
like
a name
Tyler,
tag.
Maybe he looks like the Tyler. You called me Matthew. Like I said, all his white guys look the same or something.
But when we look at that, I think it's important for us to do that now. And Mark, I'll ask you: have you ever taken the time, like, really to look at, where you were on issues, and are there biases that you possess, and have you gone through that process?
Yeah, probably not as much as I should. Number one, but I'm aware of biases I do have. I'm not proud of them. I'm not going to talk about what they are, but I do have them. And I think, frankly, irrespective of race, everybody has biases.
Oh, for sure.
And I think the most important thing is to be cognizant of those things, and then so that you're conscious not to let that impact what the decisions you make and things you say or things you do. And
it's hard because it's such a part of our DNA. It's, if you're in a situation where certain things, and there's these microaggressions, that I hear, I was like, you're very intelligent for a Black man. Like, what does that mean? You're super articulate for a Black man. Those are microaggressions. I
wouldn't call that a microaggression. That's pretty blatant.
But I hear them all the time.
Backhanded compliment.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it is. But I'm just telling you, these things occur, and if you are in a particular environment where those types of conversations are the norm, then you can carry certain things and not even realize what you're doing. But I think it's important for us to confront our own sins. Where are we at? And I think that this is the first step is a very hard step for a lot of people, Mark. I think that this is when we have those conversations, when we have those. Oh, okay, I got you. Frank saying for a black man is silent. Oh, I was just supposed to say, you're very articulate. Okay, I gotcha. Maybe I gave too much of that. I know in my head I'm thinking, oh, for a black man, that's what it was. So I gave away the whole thing. But when we look at this and we have these conversations about race and racism, it's hard for us. And I think that for white America, my struggle has always been that my white counterparts, and even you being here, Mark, I told you, like Mark said, hey, Kareem, there's really not much of an upside for me having this conversation about race, in this climate. But I respect the fact that you are bold enough to have that, and I'll continually say that. And because you are honest, I want you to be honest, and understand that I'm never going to leave you out. I'm going to lead you down a path and just kind of leave you out there as long as you're open and honest about your conversation, where you're coming. But white America struggles with having conversations with race. And my question is why? Why is there such a struggle to have that conversation? And Chandler, no, I'm just joking. And Chandler, I saw your eyes light up. Go ahead.
I honestly feel like there's a lot of people. It's a misconception about what a conversation of race is.
Okay. When
you talk to a white person about race who has not done any research and not gone, wow, this kind of stuff happens all the time, and I gotta number one, own it, and then work to make the world better. But a lot of people look at it and they don't look at it objectively, and they go, well, that's not my fault. Why do I have to talk about this? Why do I have to? They get defensive. Like, yeah. Like, no, I'm not the bad person here. I didn't do anything wrong. It's like, no, but you gotta recognize that this is a thing.
Yeah, and I think that was one of, when we were talking, and we're not going to go down this path today, but we probably will in a future conversation, when they were talking about CRT, critical race theory, and, do we want to teach our kids this? And it's so interesting because I had something happen, and they were like, well, we don't want our white kids feeling uncomfortable talking about race and things that they didn't have anything to do with. And it becomes an issue. And I struggle to understand how is having a conversation about what has happened fully in our past problematic. And as a young black man growing up, I had to deal with what really happened my entire life, not from textbooks, but from living this thing and hearing my grandparents talk about it. So I'm just kind of interested, is there a reason, Mark, that you might, and I know that you can't speak for all of white America, sure, just like I wouldn't want you to speak for all of black America, that you think?
Well, I think I totally agree with what he said, that in a certain sense, it's like some of this stuff I've never participated in, or it happened 200 years ago, 100 years ago. And why are you trying to cast light? They're defensive, like, well, I'm not a racist. What do you
I've
mean?
never owned slaves.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the other thing is a little bit, it's kind of what I said to you off the air last week, a little bit is like, there's nothing but almost downside to having, for a white person to have a discussion about race at some point, because they're afraid they're going to say something wrong and they're going to be labeled a racist, which is the last thing.
You racist.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to be very honest. Black people aren't just waiting around to call white people racist. And I think that in many situations, because things have happened, and honestly, I think that we do things and we've allowed things. And I think that as a nation, many people are becoming more sensitive to what they say and how they communicate certain things because of that reason.
Yeah.
You ain't about to drop the race card on me. But I think that we have to understand that certain things, as we discuss them, are uncomfortable. And until we are able to deal with that that discomfort, then we really it struggles to move beyond the next level. There's a couple of things that if I thought about, we were sitting here and having, one of the things was talking about what I think Jeff was saying, that we are willing to recompense the wrong for right. And
I don't agree with that.
Right.
We've had that discussion.
And I think, and explain to me, Mark, and I understand, because there's a lot of people that feel like, why should we have reparations?
Stop? I've been wronged.
Right.
there's people around here that are making way less money than they should. I'm not talking about the radio station, but just in general, where does that stop? Everyone has been wronged in this world. And how does giving someone $1,000, $10,000 fundamentally change who they are or what their life is going forward? And so I just think throwing money at the problem of something that happened in the past is just not going to fix the problem going forward. I just don't.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think when I look at that, Mark, and I thank you for being bold enough to share that. First of all, I thank you, and because I want you to feel comfortable with having these conversations, because I think a lot of people feel that way. And the thing that I often say, and I think that is very important, is that where will $1,000 get me? Okay, today, if we were to say 1,000, we're talking actually trillions. But when you look at this, like last week, I talked about the fact that slaves built, the Capitol building and the White House and much of the Capitol complex. Now, the thing about it is that they weren't given a compensation for the work that they did. As a matter of fact, their slave owners were compensated for the work that those slave owners did. So now we have a Capitol building that exists, a Capitol complex that exists, a White House that exists until just recently. We've had the first African-American family to occupy that. So there has been a year after year, generationally, a storehouse of benefit that has been.
That's happened all over the world through history.
But
so Northern Africa was built by slaves. Europe was
absolutely. So, and I think that in the United States is different for this purpose, because this was a country that the labor and the hardcore. I mean, when you look at the tobacco industries, this country, this is a nation that is built on last names. So when you look at the countries and the entities and the brands that lead this country, there are family names. Where did those family names get their benefit and their value from? From when you go back, they made profit off of the Afro-Negro slave.
Sure.
And there has never been the conversation of compensation. And I'll say this, and I'm going to give you a chance to talk, Mark. Every other, the United States is not averse to the concept of having reparations at all. We see these conversations as it related to Hiroshima, and they, built back Hiroshima. We see these conversations as it related to the Native American. We see these conversations as they relate to a lot of different populations, even to the Jews. There's an understanding that what happened with the Jews was an atrocity that was not fair, and that there was a need to right wrong. And the only nationality that I don't see that taking place is for the Ados, the African descendant of slaves. And I think it's an atrocity that has to be addressed. And I'm not saying give a check, because I think education and knowledge is power, but we don't even get free education in the institutions that we help to build. And so I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to take place. And when we talk about confronting those things, this becomes a piece of the puzzle that becomes a very difficult conversation. So I'm interested in Chandler. I was going to call you Chandler. Chandler, Mark, what are your thoughts when we think about it in that capacity?
I mean, in terms of the way I've read things about people want to check when they talk about reparations. Some dude or some woman wants to check. And I ultimately, again, I go back to my original argument. It's, if you look at the early industrial age, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, these guys got obscenely rich. Absolutely. And a lot of people helped them get rich and weren't fairly compensated. Absolutely. So should those people go back and get money from that? Now these wealthy families, maybe, I don't know, but
it happens.
Well, I just don't think that solves the problem going forward. So I'm all for, because some guy getting a check for $5,000, that's great, but it's gone. And it doesn't fix the problem. And I'm about fixing the problem.
One way we can fix the problem. We were talking about Black Wall Street. There's a whole issue there. Blacks are not without ingenuity and insight on how to create and how to develop and how to build and how to create wealth.
Yep.
We've talked on off record before about one of the biggest issues being the issue of generational wealth gap. And so one of the things that I think that we can do as a nation is, in many cases where there are young Blacks or mature Blacks or whatever it is that are interested in creating business, the major issue always becomes capital. And not only is there an issue with capital because we don't have, houses and a plantation, and, we don't when our grandparents die, it's usually because we've had to create, fine dinners and things to bury them, because we do not have this reoccurring wealth that happens in our communities. So I think one of the ways that we can do that is to create funds where African Americans can have a better access point to housing. I think also to education. A perfect example is my fifth great grandfather was sold into slavery to keep Georgetown University open. I've shared that story before, and I've never been afforded to just go to Georgetown University, even though it wouldn't exist for some of these white Americans to have these amazing degrees from there. But why not have those descendants of that family have an opportunity to go to school for free in those areas? I think that knowledge is power. I think that finances at the end of the day are going to be a key component. How you deal with, I think that if you give a poor man $1 million, he's going to be poor again, because there's a mentality that also has to be attacked. But I certainly want us to begin to have that conversation. Mark, I'm going to give you a couple seconds. If there's anything you want to say in closing, we got about 1 minute left.
Just enjoy the conversation. And I just encourage people to get out there and meet people you don't know and begin to break down those walls.
And Mark and I have these conversations, and I appreciate it so much. And I appreciate your honesty, Mark. And I hope that you guys are challenging yourselves to have these tough conversations, because we really can't become the nation that we desire to become until we begin to break down those walls. Let's get a little heated under the conversation, under the collar. Let's ruffle our feathers, because once you get past that, you'll recognize, as Mark, you said earlier, there is more that unites us than really divides us. And as we begin to look toward a better tomorrow, I was looking at the fact that we're getting ready to go to war. And someone said the thing that brought NATO together, like they've never been able to come together before, is a war. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so we have to begin to do some things that are different in our communities that we've never done. And I think that word is communicate. Communicate often, communicate regularly, and be willing to do the work. It's hard work, but we're sitting here, hopefully that you guys can be inspired by the conversations that we have here to change your world. And thank you guys. Hopefully no more white or black, but United Shades of Gray. Thank you. Hey guys, we want to thank you guys. Mark and I are here, and we had this amazing conversation with you guys today. And I hope you guys, this is a real conversation. We talk about what we're going to talk about, but we don't talk about our particular positions on this as we come in. But we have had some opportunity to really just kind of talk about things in time's plan. And so I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want you guys to like, tag, and share this conversation. If we're really going to be a better community, a better nation, better state, better America, then we've got to have these tough conversations. They don't feel good always, and they don't always leave the best taste in your mouth. But go home, get yourself a glass of lemonade or Kool-Aid, swiggle around, and that taste just goes right away. But we've got to be willing to do the hard work, and that hard work starts with these conversations. Mark, there's anything you would like to share as we're here? Mark is like, I'm all here. He's all good.
No, this is, as always, love the conversation. I think, again, this is just a perfect example of, like, we don't agree.
Absolutely.
But I know you're a good man and have a great heart.
Absolutely.
I think, I'm a good person and have a good heart. And despite those differences, we've done a number of things in the community that make a difference. And my hope here is that, again, that it's okay to disagree as long as you're respectful and you seek to understand the other person's perspective
first. Yeah.
And then because once you get to know someone, the vast majority of times you find out they're good people.
Absolutely. And one thing that I will say, some of the greatest things that are happening around here, there's a lot going on. Mark, you've been very integral in what's taking place in our community, especially when you're at the helm of what's happening with Hemlock Semiconductor. If it had not been for your investment and your trusting, I'm coming in, you don't know anything about me at that particular time, and you're trusting that this is going to impact our community. You're willing to jump on that because you recognize there was a need to make an impact. And so I greatly appreciate that. And so those of you who are out there, please like, tag, and share this conversation, and have one of your own. Find a group of people that are different than yourself. And as we have these conversations, maybe do a listening party, and you guys can be empowered and challenge. Maybe you put together some questions that you
We
guys
used to do that at work. You could watch a broadcast
and then
and then have a debrief afterwards and have your own discussion. I don't know about lemonade, but we would have whiskey or something.
All right. So we thank you guys for tuning in today. And we want you to tune in next week for more United Shades of Gray. Mark has promised us that he's going to be wearing his Speedo on poolside next week when we get ready to have the conversation in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
You guys take care. Have a great evening. Grace and peace.